They walked among us, the keepers of wisdom. They came from the stars, and their story, it begins here. The stars. They remember everything.
The Anunnaki, the full chronicles of the star gods. Part 1. The dawn of the Sumerian miracle. To truly understand the Anunnaki, we must first look at the soil from which their legend grew. Southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. This is where history, as we know it, begins. But it doesn't begin with a whisper. It begins with a roar. Around 4000 BCE, the Sumerians developed things that should have taken thousands of years to evolve. They had high-heat kilns, complex irrigation, and a writing system, cuneiform, that allowed them to record everything from tax receipts to the movements of the planets. But there is a haunting quality to their records. Unlike other ancient peoples who took credit for their inventions, the Sumerians were humble. They insisted that they were merely the stewards of a civilization established by the Anunnaki. They described these beings as tall, radiant, and possessing me, a set of divine objects or data disks that contained the blueprints for every aspect of civilization, from how to build a temple to how to govern a city. Was this me a form of ancient software? A digital library of a far more advanced civilization? Part 2. The Cosmic Origin. The Mystery of Nibiru. If we follow the controversial path laid by scholars like Zecharia Sitchin, we find ourselves looking far beyond our atmosphere. The theory suggests that the Anunnaki did not come from another star system, but from a rogue member of our own solar system, Nibiru. According to the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth, Nibiru is a homeless planet that was captured by our sun's gravity millions of years ago. It moves on a retrograde, highly elliptical orbit, taking 3,600 Earth years to complete one circuit, a time period the Sumerians called a Sar. Imagine the biological implications of such an orbit. The Anunnaki would live for hundreds of thousands of Earth years because their biological clock was tied to a much longer solar cycle. To us, they would appear immortal. Sitchin argued that the Anunnaki faced an atmospheric crisis. Their planet was losing its internal heat. Their scientists determined that only a shield of suspended gold particles could save their world. And so, the celestial search for gold began, leading them eventually to the third planet, Earth. Part 3. The Arrival and the First Cities. 450,000 years ago, the first expedition touched down in the waters of the Persian Gulf. Leading this mission was Enki, the master engineer. He established the first colonial outpost, Eridu, which means home in the faraway. The Sumerian king list, a stone prism that lists the reigns of kings, states, after the kingship lowered from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. The reigns of these first kings lasted for tens of thousands of years. Mainstream historians call these numbers mythological exaggeration. But what if they are literal? If the kings were Anunnaki, or their direct hybrids, their lifespans would naturally dwarf our own. The mission was clear: extract gold. They set up massive mining operations in South Africa, the Abzu. For thousands of years, the lower-ranking Anunnaki, the Igigi, toiled in the dark mines. But the Igigi were not mindless drones. They were intelligent beings. Around 300,000 years ago, they reached their breaking point. They burned their tools and staged a coup, surrounding Enlil's palace in the city of Nippur. Part 4. The Genetic Laboratory of the Gods. The crisis in the mines forced a council of the gods. Enlil wanted to punish the rebels, but Enki, the visionary, offered a different path. He spoke of a creature that already roamed the earth, a hominid with the potential for higher intelligence. The Sumerian texts describe a process that sounds chillingly modern. They speak of purifying the blood and mixing the clay. In the house of Shimti, which translates to the house where the breath of life is breathed, Enki and his sister, the geneticist Ninhursag, began the work. They weren't creating life from scratch, they were upgrading it. They took the DNA of the Anunnaki and spliced it with the DNA of Homo erectus. After many failures, recorded in the texts as creatures with mismatched organs or sterile bodies, they finally achieved success. They called him the Adapa, or the Lulu. This was the first modern human. We were created with the intelligence to use tools and follow orders, but with one crucial limitation. We were not given the Anunnaki's long lifespan. We were the short-lived ones, designed to be the labor force for the gods. Part 5. The Forbidden Knowledge. As humanity grew in number, our relationship with our creators shifted. Enki, who had grown fond of his creation, began to grant humans more knowledge than Enlil had intended. He taught us agriculture, metallurgy, and the secrets of the stars. This is where the story of the Anunnaki mirrors the story of the Prometheus from Greek myth, or the serpent in the Garden of Eden. In the Sumerian version, the serpent is actually Enki. His symbol was the snake, representing wisdom and DNA. By giving humans the fruit of knowledge, he gave us the ability to think for ourselves, to replicate, and to eventually build our own civilizations. Enlil was horrified. He viewed this as a contamination of the divine order. He feared that if humans had both knowledge and long life, they would become exactly like the Anunnaki. This tension between the strict father, Enlil, and the wise teacher, Enki, is the foundation of the duality we see in almost every world religion: the God who punishes and the God who saves. Part 6. The Deluge, the Great Erasure. The breaking point came with the Great Flood. The Sumerian tablets tell us that the noise of humanity became unbearable to Enlil. But noise may be a mistranslation or a metaphor for rebellion. Enlil convinced the other Anunnaki to allow a natural disaster, a massive tidal wave caused by the proximity of Nibiru, to wipe out the human race. Enki, sworn to secrecy, found a loophole. He didn't tell a human directly. He spoke to the wall of a reed hut, while the hero Ziusudra listened on the other side. He gave him instructions to build a great boat and to preserve the seed of all living creatures. When the waters receded, the Anunnaki, watching from their orbiting craft, felt a mixture of grief and hunger. They realized they had destroyed the very labor force that provided their food. When they saw Ziusudra's survival, Enlil was eventually appeased by Enki's wisdom. A new pact was made. The Anunnaki would remain as distant rulers, and they would grant kingship to humans, the right to rule on behalf of the gods. Part 7. The Evidence of the Megaliths. To those who believe in the physical reality of the Anunnaki, the evidence is etched in stone across the globe. We see the Giza Plateau, where the Great Pyramid is aligned to the stars with a precision that requires aerial surveying. We see Pumapunku in Bolivia, where stones are cut with right angles and drill holes that suggest the use of high-speed power tools. The Anunnaki theory suggests these weren't just tombs or temples. They were functional sites. Some theorists believe the pyramids were power plants or communication beacons. The massive stones of Baalbek were the landing pads for the Shem, the fire ships of the gods. When you look at ancient art, from Sumer to the Maya, you see a recurring image, a god carrying a small handbag and wearing what looks like a wristwatch. Mainstream archaeology calls these ceremonial buckets, but to a modern eye, they look like portable technology, perhaps the stabilizers or life support systems needed by extraterrestrials on a foreign planet. Part 8. The Departure and the Promised Return. Around 2000 BCE, the presence of the Anunnaki in the texts begins to fade. There are records of a deadly wind, a cloud of radiation or poison that swept across Sumer, killing the population and forcing the gods to flee in their flying birds. Was this an ancient nuclear conflict? The lamentation over the destruction of describes the sky turning dark and the water turning bitter in a way that sounds hauntingly like the aftermath of a modern war. The Anunnaki retreated, but they did not leave without a trace. They left us with the divine right of kings, the calendar we still use, and a deep-seated longing for the stars. Every major religion waits for a savior to descend from the clouds. Is this a biological memory of our creators? If the 3,600-year cycle of Nibiru is accurate, we are currently living in the window of their potential return. As our telescopes scan the Kuiper Belt for the elusive Planet 9, we may be looking for our ancient masters. Part 9. Conclusion. Who are we? The story of the Anunnaki forces us to confront the ultimate question. What does it mean to be human? If we are a slave race created by extraterrestrials, does that diminish our value? Or does it make us the greatest experiment in the galaxy, a bridge between the primitive and the divine? We are a species with a dual nature. We have the aggressive, territorial instincts of the earthbound hominid and the creative, star-searching intellect of the Anunnaki. We are the children of two worlds. As we move toward becoming a multiplanetary species ourselves, we are following in the footsteps of those who came before. Perhaps we are not just waiting for the Anunnaki to return. Perhaps we are becoming the Anunnaki.